Lancashire town.
I'm Cat Lewis, and the woman who's been a great inspiration to me is Ellen Wilkinson. I've chosen Ellen Wilkinson because she was the first female Labour MP. She was born here in Manchester into a poor family of 9 children in Ardwick, and she became MP for Middlesbrough. When she became an MP, it was actually in 1924, which is 4 years before women had the absolute vote. So I think it's extraordinary that there she was in the House of Commons, one of only 4 women MPs, and it is quite an intimidating place to be. So Ellen was 33 when she was first elected, and she was representing at the time one of the world's biggest iron and steel producing areas. And yet all the press wanted to know about was what she was wearing, how she did her hair, and she found this so frustrating. She couldn't believe that they didn't care about what she did. All they cared about is what she looks like. And the sad thing is that 90 years on, nothing's really changed. So in 1931, Ellen lost her seat, but she became an extraordinary journalist. She secured an interview with Mahatma Gandhi when he was in prison, and she talked to him about the conditions in India. Ellen travelled to Germany, and she wrote an article about the terror that was happening over there. And this is a time when a lot of people in the UK thought that Hitler may well be a good thing for Germany. But she saw through that, and in 1931 wrote an extraordinary article about how terrifying the Nazis were. So in 1935 she was elected again as Labour MP for Jarrow, and so she fought for the welfare state. Ellen Wilkinson became the first ever female Minister for Education, and what she did is she created free school meals for children from poorer families, and that's something that a lot of people still benefit from. She did such a lot to change the world into a better place while she was alive, and that's what I find so inspiring.
I'm Ruthie Begboona, and the woman who's been a big inspiration to me is Diane Charlemagne. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Reclaim Project, which is a youth leadership programme across Greater Manchester. I actually didn't know that much about Diane Charlemagne until she died, and I was listening to a lot of the obituaries about her, and they were playing the track that I absolutely loved, which was Inner City Life, an absolutely immense track. She had a real voice, a real kind of soul diva's voice. She was from Moss Side in Manchester. There are so many young people like Diane Charlemagne who have the passion and the ability from areas like Moss Side, and what we don't profile is those girls who made it. But she ended up touring the world, and I think it's important we put those young women on the stage as role models, really. I think in Manchester we're very, very good at remembering famous men, and we talk about Emmeline Pankhurst, obviously a very important woman for the world. There were so many incredible women, none of them are remembered, and I think there is something in Manchester that kind of really celebrates and supports those people who want to make changes, and I am definitely one of those people.
I'm Claire Braithwaite, and the woman who has been a great inspiration to me is Lydia Becker. She was incredibly important and a foundational figure in the women's suffrage movement, and yet very little is really known about her. She's not a very well-known figure. She was one of the key inspirations for Emmeline Pankhurst. When she was nearly 40, she came across an essay on the women's suffrage movement or on the emancipation of women, and really started to question social norms around women and how women were treated in society, and started to challenge the lack of rights that women had, including their right to vote. So she was the person who founded the women's suffrage movement in Manchester. The first meeting was in 1867, and also the first meeting of the national women's suffrage movement took place because of her work in 1868 at the Free Trade Hall in Manchester. Women's voices were not heard. Women were kept indoors and were not given the right to speak out. She was very much ridiculed for a lot of her views. She was one of the people who said, you know, unmarried women have a right to a voice as well, believe it or not. She died without seeing her mission come into reality, and I think that shows incredible courage that she carried on anyway. You know, I'd like that to be an inspiration to women, that you don't need to have someone else telling you this is the right thing to do.
Hi, I'm Emma Goswell, and the woman that's been a great inspiration to me is Sunny Lowry. Well, I always say I'm a broadcast journalist. It turns out I've ended up becoming a radio presenter as well. My everyday role involves, well, we usually say waking up the gays, because I'm actually the co-presenter on Gadio. I was attracted to talk about Sunny Lowry because she is a phenomenal swimmer. I mean, she got an OBE for services to swimming. She dedicated her life to teaching swimming, but she's really known for one thing that she did. Flash yourselves back to the summer of 1933. Picture the scene on a beach near Dover. Sunny Lowry couldn't even walk up the beach. She crawled up the beach because she became the first British woman to swim the channel. She'd been swimming for 15 hours. She crawled up that beach, covered in grease, with her neck swollen from jellyfish bites. She hadn't eaten in 15 hours. She just had cocoa, hot coffee and beef tea off the side of the support boat for 15 hours to take that record. At the age of 22, pretty phenomenal. She really put Manchester on the map. And the fact that she did 2 failed attempts to try and cross that channel and then went again to do a third and achieved it on a third time, I think is a really powerful message and a really powerful metaphor for women. But in terms of striving to get what you want, you have to keep on trying.
I'm Debbie Abrahams, and the woman who is a great inspiration to me is Annie Kenney. Annie Kenney was actually born in Spring Head in Saddleworth. She was born on the 13th of September 1879, and at the age of 10 she went to work in a cotton mill, and very shortly afterwards she lost one of her fingers. And in spite of that, she was really a driven young woman, and she read Robert Blatchford's The Clarion, and it was doing that she became very interested in the Labour Party and joined her local Labour Party. She became so interested in this and she became really involved with the Pankhurst, and ultimately she joined the Women's Social and Political Union. At the time, a very radical, very forward-thinking, very militant group trying to promote and progress women's rights. She tried to encourage and recruit other working class women into the movement. They went and disrupted meetings, so ultimately they were arrested and they were imprisoned. She actually was the first woman that was released under the Cat and Mouse Act, which was when women were seen to be close to death as a result of hunger strikes, that they would be released. You know, women were prepared to die. She is one of the reasons I'm here. You know, as an elected Member of Parliament, if it hadn't been for the likes of Annie and other women like her, then we may not have had the vote.
I'm Tasia, and the woman who has been a great inspiration to me is Emmeline Pankhurst.
I'm Emily, and the woman who's been a great inspiration to me is Emmeline Pankhurst. She was one of the first women to actually fight for women's rights, and we wouldn't be where we are today without her.
Emmeline Pankhurst was born in Moss Side. Her parents were politically active, however they raised her to be prepared for life as a mother.
I believe she had 5 children, and although she was raised to act as a mother, she wanted to be an independent woman herself, so formed the suffragette movement for women.
So the Manchester Pankhurst Centre is a museum that anybody can go to remember Emmeline or learn about her. It's actually her old house, so the Pankhurst Centre was founded in her living room. The statue of Emmeline is going to be built in Manchester. The people of Manchester voted for her because I think they felt passionately about her work and that she definitely needed to be remembered and commemorated.
When you're in school, you only really learn about the men leaders that have achieved so much in their life, whereas now at 18 I'm just learning about women that have actually influenced their life, and I think it's really good and we should bring that down to younger generations.
What really stands out for me about Emmeline is like the dedication that she had to her work. I don't think it really matters what you want to do in life. She clearly believed in her goal and her purpose, so she just went for it. So whatever you want to do, if you have the mentality that she does, I'm sure you could succeed in it.
I am Angela Harrington, and the woman that has been of great inspiration to me is Hannah Mitchell. Born in 1872 in a small village in Derbyshire in the Peak District, and she was one of 6 children. She grew up in a very poor household. She observed very early on that the boys and the girls in her family were treated very differently. And then when she was 13, to supplement the family income, she went out to work as a domestic. Her mother was quite cruel, it seems, and certainly not very loving or supportive, and she had a big row with her when she was 14 and she left and she moved from Allport in Derbyshire to Bolton. She was important to Manchester in lots of ways, I think. She was a suffragette. She campaigned tirelessly for them. In fact, to the extent where she had a nervous breakdown. It seems like she had a nervous breakdown from exhaustion and malnutrition. She subsequently left and joined the women's freedom movement. She worked and spent her working life in and around Manchester. She became a member of Manchester City Council. For us living in the 21st century, it's difficult to imagine how tough her life was. And I think that's really important for people to make the most of their talent. The key thing for me is, you know, education, doing something that you feel makes a difference, and I guess doing it in the city of Manchester.
I'm Sandy Lindsay, and the woman who's been the greatest inspiration to me is Louise Da-Codia, or otherwise known as Mrs. D. One of my favourite all-time sayings is, I always thought somebody should do something about this, and then I remembered that I was somebody, and I think Louise absolutely defines that saying because her whole life was spent doing something for other people. Born in Jamaica, Louise moved to Great Britain in the 1950s, and she made an awful lot of difference in Greater Manchester. She created a lot of community groups. She became a lieutenant of Greater Manchester eventually, 30 odd years in nursing, and basically her whole life was about changing the way we thought about all sorts of prejudice. She also talked to young black people about not just the way that their life is affected, but how they can play an active role, and all sorts of lots of different people about how they can play an active role in making things better. And she was absolutely passionate in making a difference when actually her life would have been so much easier if she'd just stayed quiet. I think what was most impressive about Mrs. D was that she was awarded an MBE in 2005, and it was for services to the people of Manchester, and I think that's something to be really proud of. Louise embodies Manchester and what the spirit of Manchester is, which is there's something wrong here, there's something that could be done better, let's make it happen. Let's not sit around moaning about it and thinking somebody else should change it. Let's get together and let's make a difference. To me, that's the only thing that's ever changed anything in the whole history of the world.